13 productivity and professionalism must-haves for remote work success. In a moment, I'll explain exactly how we handle these 13 items for our team in real life.
This is The Rare Advisor, proud to be a part of the Advisor Advancement Network and home of a business model supercharged by recurring and repeatable events. Your host is Mike Walters, CEO of USA Financial. He is an investment advisor representative of, and securities are offered through USA Financial Securities, member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
Hey, welcome everybody. Today I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path with the Rare Advisor because what we're going to talk about are the 13 key factors to having productivity and professionalism in a remote work environment. So USA Financial, following the pandemic, has embraced remote work flexibilities. So we are handling remote work very differently than we used to prior to the pandemic. I think pretty much the whole world is, right? And it depends on your business, how much flexibility you may or may not allow, because again, in the world of business, in the world of running a financial practice, it all comes down to productivity and professionalism. The key is there are 13 items that we have discovered that will help you to make sure you're maintaining the same productivity and professionalism for yourself or for any of your staff working remotely as you would expect and adhere to if they were working on site. That's the key. The only way remote work flexibilities will work effectively for you is if you can maintain the same levels of productivity and professionalism that you would in an on-site environment. So the key is working remote equals on-site work. It's the same level of what is expected. This is where people fall apart. This is where careers go astray. When people confuse remote work with thinking it's quasi-vacation time, or it means I don't need a nanny or a babysitter anymore because now I can take care of the kids, even though they're disrupting me all day long. Or it means that, now I can go mow my lawn and I can show up for work late. Or whatever the issue might be, you can think of them all. That's not where remote work is. Remote work is remote work. And it has the same level of productivity and professionalism as does on-site work. So the key is to make sure that you, with your team and you running your company, your financial practice, can maintain the interaction levels that you need in order to support your client base, the culture and community of your business, and the success of your business in a remote environment or in, whatever flexibilities you're allowing for. Maybe certain days people can be remote and other days they cannot. Maybe that changes by the job. Maybe that changes by the person. Maybe that changes based upon how you have achieved or graded the people, identifying their abilities to work effectively remotely based upon their personalities, based upon the site that they are working remotely from, and how is it structured, and does it support them for success, or does it erode against their success? And then again, right down to the skill sets and the job requirements and what needs to be done. Some things can simply not be done effectively remotely and must be on site. So again, what will always prevail? The answer to every question is, how does it affect productivity and professionalism? If productivity and professionalism remain high, remain at the same level as on-site or maybe even above, then great, green light this stuff. But if not, all the caution lights go on. All the stoplights start blinking, right? So you have to think this through. We've identified 13 things that we want the people at USA Financial to be in line with, to be in sync with, to maintain the productivity and professionalism for USA Financial, again, whether remote or on-site, but also for their careers, whether it's remote or on-site. So I'm going to talk to you about a number of these. I'm going to go through it kind of quick. I've got a document that we literally have. It's kind of our little common sense cheat sheet that we provide. You're welcome to take a look at that. Reach out to us at USA Financial. We're happy to share these things with you to help you run a better financial practice. Now, I'm not going to go through all the nitty-gritty details of the stuff in a way that will bore you. I'm going to keep this thing moving. I want to hit on the highlights. I want to talk to you about what really matters, and again, how we want to keep productivity and professionalism at the top. That's the goal. That's what dictates if remote work is working correctly. So let's do a quick share screen, and I will show you and talk to you specifically about what I'm talking about in terms of making this thing work for your business. Now, again, keep in mind that the world has changed since the pandemic. I will tell you that Mike Walters personally was not a huge fan of remote work prior to the pandemic, mostly because people were not commonly trained and comfortable at a core level in having conversations the way we are now, dealing with Zoom calls, dealing with MS Teams calls, dealing with digital interactions. But now, not only have we become comfortable with it, blowing through that education curve, but so have the clients, right? Because they wanted to stay in touch with the kids and the grandkids. And so they've learned and become comfortable with this as well. So now when you're servicing your snowbirds, much better environment than you used to deal with because you can interact this way. So keep in mind, one other thing I'll say really quick before we jump into the document is, if you're looking at the scale, over here is phone calls. Over here is live face-to-face interaction. Video or digital interaction, it falls much closer on the scale to a face-to-face event than it does to a phone call. So that's what the core is in terms of productivity and professionalism. That's what raises the bar in terms of what you need to have to work effectively in a remote environment. So right here, and get the pen working. Right here, I'll just tell you what we do at USA Financial is we have a core structure of tech that we provide our employees. It starts with a laptop so they can take that remote or on site. And then it comes with multiple screens and, camera and just all the different things that they might need, a docking station to be effective in their work. Now, if they live within a circumference of USA Financial's offices, if they can show up and work on location, then we're going to structure it so that as they're toggling back and forth remotely and on site, all of that stuff is ready for them in an on-site environment. Now, if they work exclusively remote, they live too far away or whatever the case might be, then that gets shipped to them and that becomes their remote structure. But if they're toggling, which is, what so many people are doing, hybrid, right? They're spending a few days on site, few days off site. Maybe they're doing the majority of their time on site. Maybe they're doing the majority of their time remotely, but they are spending time in both places. Then we're going to have the core set up at the office for them. And then they can take their laptop, they can go to their remote environment, and then it's up to them to get the rest of that structured appropriately. We'll provide them, as you can see here, number 2, an allowance to kind of help reimburse them on some of this stuff that we think is important. But it's kind of up to them. If this is something that they're choosing to do for their career, for their lifestyle, then they have to take it seriously and they have to structure themselves accordingly. And that's kind of what all this is about. The other thing that we hang our hat on with the tech is that our IT team has to ping them. It has to make sure that some of these things right here are taking place. So I'll kind of lump these 3 together for you here. We want to make sure that they have proper connectivity, that they have good internet speed, so on and so forth, that they've got proper security components that our IT team puts in place. And if that won't work for them, then they have to up that game at the remote environment or they have to come back to on-site. So they might have to call their internet provider and, bump up the speed or whatever the case might be. For us, phone calls need to be captured, especially for people who are actively helping with portfolios and trades and so on. So we have a system that they have to route those phone calls through. And then finally, if they're having technical difficulties, what's important to me is the person, the skill set, what they bring to the table in terms of their ability to represent our company. If they're in the dark, if their tech is down and it can't get put back up soon, and they're near enough by, I want to relocate back to on-site. I don't want to lose like a sick day, the equivalent of a sick day with someone because their tech isn't working. Because what matters to me is their expertise, and I want to keep their expertise rolling. Again, productivity and professionalism. We also don't want people chasing everybody down. So we have a requirement that they update their calendars so that we know if they're remote versus on-site. So if you're physically looking for someone, you know where to look. And then this is key. Going to work for the day, whether on-site or remote, it's the same thing, right? It's the same level of productivity and professionalism. So if I'm having an interaction with a customer or even a coworker, I need to come at it the same way remotely as I would in terms of being on site. So I need to make sure my environment supports that. I need to make sure my family supports that, or whatever the conditions are that I live in, that it supports me going to work remotely, just like I would go to work in an on-site environment. So now let's kind of jump the fence and focus more on the professionalism side for a minute. First of all, I need an environment without distractions, just like I'd have in the office. I don't want a bunch of people walking around. I'm not going to sit there and have the kids running through, the dogs running through, the doorbells ringing constantly, whatever it is. Those distractions have to be eliminated. This is a work environment. So you need to have a section of your home that's conducive to remote work, and people need to honor that in order for it to work effectively. Now, we also want to have a good representation. This is now my stage, right? So if I'm having a personal appointment with somebody, this is what they see. And I want that to reflect on the positive aspects of the company and myself. Again, productivity and professionalism. So we don't like the digital backgrounds. They always ghost and, people's arms and stuff disappear. Sometimes you get like this halo effect around their head. They don't work very well. We want real backgrounds and we want it to look nice, right? So this is my den that candidly I didn't use a whole lot prior to the pandemic. And it become a little bit of a storage room. So out in front of me, where you can't see, there's some stuff stacked up and whatever that I wouldn't necessarily want to project the term of professionalism for Mike Walters and USA Financial. So I had to turn my desk around. I had to clean this corner up. I had to stage it because that's what it is. It's my stage and I want it to look good. Same thing is true with your on-site office, by the way. My on-site office, I had to flip it around once this became so popular with the pandemic that we would have Zoom calls and digital calls. Because in my old setup, I had a bunch of bank of windows behind me and it would silhouette me and it didn't work well on video. So I had to flip it around. Now I have a wall behind me and I look out at the windows. I actually like it better this way. I don't know why it wasn't set that way in the first place. It actually looks nicer, but it also, more importantly, it works on having video appointments, which is what we're most concerned about here. Now, speaking of that, think about your camera location. It needs to be at eye level or above. Nobody wants to be looking up your nose. So we want that to come again across effectively. Doesn't do me any favors. Definitely doesn't do them any favors to be looking up my nose. So I want the camera in the right spot. If you're working off the camera on your laptop needs to be elevated. And there's simple ways to do that with a book or a box or whatever. There's also, more common ways that you can do that. You can have a desk that raises and lowers. You could have, there's these little tools that you put a little platform underneath your laptop. You flip a lever and it raises it up. All kinds of ways to solve the problem, but it's a problem you need to solve. And then same thing with the lighting. I have to have good lighting. So there's lighting up here that you can't see. I've got lighting up in the ceiling that just I kind of position myself accordingly. Now this back here is a little bit backlit, but I had to put up that blind to tone that down a bit so it would work. Because if it's too bright and blasting in, that's not going to be functional either. I have to think this stuff through. And then attire, right? So back when I entered the industry, it was, top dog. Needed to be very professional attire, 3-piece suit, tie cinched up, the whole works. That's how it was when I entered this industry back in the late 80s. But since then, it's dropped down to more of a business casual environment, maybe a sport coat, but you don't need the tie, whatever it might be. Today, thanks to the pandemic, I don't know if it's temporary or long term, but I'd say we're down kind of at almost like resort casual. I mean, look at me. Here I am in a golf shirt and I'm feeling pretty comfortable. I've talked to most advisors nowadays, and this is about how they're dressing. So it's come down a little bit. Now, there are times when we'll step it up. We have special events or whatever going on, and we're going to bump that back up. I'll put the sport coat on. Or if your customers expect it, you have to dress accordingly, and therefore so does your staff. Because remember, when you're going to work for the day, you're going to work for the day, whether it's remote or it's on site. If you would have normally put a sport coat on because of what you were doing that day, maybe you should put a sport coat on for what you're doing today in a remote environment as well. So think those things through in terms of what your work attire is. Basically, what we say is we have the same work attire, the same requirements, whether you're on site or you're remote. When you go to work, you dress like you're going to work. And then again, I already said this, but a video call much more closely aligned with a face-to-face appointment than it is with a phone call. Nobody can see what's going on with the phone call. It doesn't matter. But on the appointments that we now have so often through video, and almost all of our interactions are that way, we need to look appropriately. We're not showing up to work in a t-shirt and a baseball hat. We're not showing up to work without shaving or showering. We are looking like we're going to work, and that's the key. We need to structure this. Now, the last thing I'll keep in mind is, or I mentioned for you to keep in mind, I should say, is, people are built for community, and people can get in a really dark space if they're working remotely all the time. And some people aren't wired for it at all. Other people are more so, but sometimes it just has to do with the environment. And I think people way undervalue all the interactions that take place during an on-site day at the office. Grabbing lunch with somebody, having a laugh, walking through the office, bumping into someone on the way to the restroom or the break room, and just interacting and enjoying each other's company, maybe doing a little collaborating, maybe solving a problem together, whatever it might be. Those things can get lost in a remote environment. Your culture can get lost in a remote environment. So you have to think about, how are you going to support remote workers, and should certain people not be remote? Now, we've had a bunch of people at USA Financial who have said, I don't want to be remote. I want to be on site. My house isn't set up for it. My family's not conducive to it. There's too many distractions, whatever it might be. I want to be on site. And other people are saying, well, I'd prefer to be remote, or maybe I'd prefer to be remote the majority of the time and on site only a minority of the time. And I'm in that camp. I'm majority on site, minority off site. I feel like I want to do a little off site, a little remote, so that I can manage my remote people appropriately. I know the hurdles they have to deal with. Right? But I'm going to always stay primarily on site, most likely. Other people might have that flip-flopped. Maybe they're primarily remote and they're only on site on certain days. It doesn't really matter, but make sure that the productivity and the professionalism stays. If someone starts going in a dark space on you, you might have to just spend a little time talking to them about the value of on-site work and get their morale built back up. So anyway, we could talk for hours about this stuff, right? But this is the core. 13 things you need to keep in mind for top-notch professionalism and productivity. And that's the question. That's the bar. That's the solution to everything. Will your remote work based on productivity and professionalism? If you get a green light on both sides, it's probably a go. Hey, hope you enjoyed it. See ya.
This information is for licensed financial professionals only and is not intended for use in soliciting sales from the public. The views expressed represent the opinions of the presenter or their featured guest, not necessarily those of USA Financial or its affiliated subsidiaries. Industry references are generic and not intended to represent actions or beliefs of any individual or entity. Content is only presented to illustrate general principles, beliefs, or ideas and should not be construed as legal or regulatory advice. Trademark and copyright protected. USA Financial and Affiliates.